My name is Ecem. I studied my undergraduate at Istanbul Technical University, and then I studied my master's at Pratt Institute in New York. Then I went to Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL in London. And for the last 3 years, I have been teaching at the MSGSÜ University, focusing mostly on digital media and communication technologies and how architects may utilize these techniques and methods in their own research and design. Today, we are gonna have first a seminar, a lecture by me, where I'm gonna show you some scenarios about how the world will change within the next 60, 100 years, because it is gonna be very different than the last 100 years. After that, we are gonna be divided into groups, and then you guys will produce some urban scenarios where different urbanization, architecture, ways of doing will manifest itself. I will detail what I'm expecting from you during these exercises, but mainly it is going to be a storytelling project rather than a design, okay? So we are going to dive into this later after the seminar. The name of the talk is Urban Features 2068. Do you know why I chose this weird date? A random date, which is 61 years from now, because that is the date we expect the world population to peak. And after that year, first time for the recent history, at least for the last 400 years, the world population will start to decline. And it is going to have really important impact on what architects do, what planners do, how cities unfold, how urban projects change, okay? First I'm gonna show, but it doesn't change. Okay, so there will be 6 parts in the presentation. The first part will be about this phenomena that I mentioned to you, how demographics and the population has been changing and how it is gonna change within the next century. Later, we are gonna look how this will impact the migration strategies and how these migration strategies may result in city building practices. Then we are going to see some scenarios, some extreme scenarios. None of those may be real, but maybe some of them will be real. That will be your call during your project, okay? And then I will introduce you some tools that you may use while you are producing the images that you are going to produce. And we will see some more speculations about the existing building blocks and how the changing population of the world will impact these building stocks. And lastly, I will just introduce you what I'm expecting you, like a brief. So maybe some of you already saw this graph. It is kind of a famous graph now, which details how within the last, especially 300 years, the world population went from 1 billion to 8 billion. Can you imagine, like, how much new housing, how much new infrastructure was needed to accommodate this many people? And how we have all these cities all around the planet that are sometimes well designed, sometimes not as well designed, but mostly very well populated and somehow working in this 200 years of period or 300 years of period. But do you see this little peak over here? Tiny, I know you don't see it. Okay. Do you see this tiny peak over here? So that's 2086, when it is gonna change. And it's not that far away from today, no? It's just 60 years. Probably many of you will be alive. Many of you will do their profession within this dynamic of the world. So it is going to be different than the previous generation who had an ever-expanding demand pool. So every day, every year, new housing projects, new public projects, new infrastructure projects, no? So now it's getting to a moment you don't really need any more projects. So what you are going to do now then? Perhaps you are going to start to develop some new techniques, strategies. This is kind of an easy explanation, and we are going to see it is not that straightforward. Because, okay, the world population will peak at 2086, but it is not going to be a homogeneous peak. okay? So especially for the last 30 years of this peak, only raising population will be in Africa. And the rest of the world, without migration, will just shrink. So it is, in the beginning, I was trying to draw a picture which is kind of stark. It's not gonna be a homogeneous story everywhere. Because do you know the population of Africa now? Any idea? Just to make an educated guess. What it may be? Do you think Africa is as populated as Europe now?
Much more.
How much more? Twice as much. Now it is twice as much. So at the moment, Africa's population is around 1.5 billion. And we are expecting it to surpass 4 billion within the next 60, 80 years, around the end of the century. Can you imagine? So what we expect, or when I say we, these are UN projections, okay? So UN is, because they're very good at doing this kind of statistical research and finding how these patterns are changing. And what they expect is the Africa's population, which is going to be added within the next 100 years. 75% of this population is going to live in cities that are not yet to build. Because the urbanization in Africa is not ready to accommodate 3 billion more people, okay? While you will have stark population declines in other parts of the world. We already started to see this in China. Maybe you follow the real estate market. In 2022, there was a housing crisis, but the crisis was the opposite because there was a deflation. So there was too many housing, but not as much demand. And now China is trying to reverse their one-child policy with 3 children per family. Maybe you heard about it as well. Because what happens as a result of the one-child policy, now every child, not every child, but most of the children have 2 housing units. One from their mother, one from their father. So they try to rent one of them, because they don't need it anymore. But what happens? There are so many units for rental, which means they're worthless, or they worth much less than what they were expecting it to worth. As a result, what happened? There was a housing crisis in terms of liquidation. So there are so many buildings that are going on, but the demand is not there. And they can see that the demand is not going to be high within the foreseeable future. So what they do is trying to reverse this tendency. So on the one hand, in one part of the world, you are going to have population surplus, which is going to appear very quick. And on the other hand, in other parts of the world, you are going to have these building stocks that are empty. But it's not really feasible or reasonable to move all these people to there. No? Can you suggest, let's move Africa to Chinese empty housing units? Does it make sense? It may happen, it may happen by itself. To a degree, it may happen, but you don't know how much it is going to happen. You may try to create some incentives for it to happen, but still you don't know. So you need to be ready for these kind of extreme scenarios. And why I'm trying, these are more graphs which are going to show what I'm trying to tell you. Here again, you see it tells you how 1 billion people, it took how many years to add 1 billion to world population. The first 1 billion happened in, from all of human history up to 1805. From 1805 to, we are around here now, it took 200 years, 220 years for it to be over 8 billion, but just 2 more billion people we are expecting, in 21 years, which is actually pretty soon. And this is another kind of graph which is showing the same thing, which is showing how it doubles. And as you can see around this time, the doubling rate is going down, which means only the acceleration rate is going down, but it still grows. So this is still not negative. And these are the world population projections by the UN again. So we are expecting this red one to happen, but it may go in other directions depending on unexpected events. You know, there may be a really big virus that happened 5 years ago, which wasn't that big, but you know, it may happen again in a bigger scale. Or some culture may change, you know, people may change for whatever reason their reproduction patterns, and then it may result in a much higher population than what we expect. But when they're doing this, when they do these kind of projections, what they look is the live births per woman, so the birth rate. What they care is they calculate these numbers by looking at the amount of children on the planet and the cultural patterns of making children for that region, you know. So what we know for sure, urbanization stalls population growth. So in the well-urbanized environments, in 2 generations, people stop making too many kids. And it's like, you can guess why, I guess, because in the rural areas, children are free labor, okay? And they're also pension. You know that they're gonna take care of you when you are old. Or you need their force, armed force, when you are cutting the crops, etc. But in urban environments, children are one more throat to feed. So it is much more expensive to take care of children. So when a place is urbanized, only, they say, 2 more generations, they continue these patterns as a habit, you know. But after 2 generations, they stop because it is just unreasonable, unsustainable. Many families cannot afford to have too many children. So this is what happens all around the world. That's why we know that when a place is urbanized, we expect it not to have too many births. That is how it is going until now. And this is the graph which shows the fertility rate. As you can see, only this part is really dark blue. That's why we are going to have 3 billion more people here, okay? So that is how they calculate what I told you before, by looking at how many children is already there and what are their habits of, like the previous generation's habits of making children. So, okay, the population is raising in some parts and not raising in some other parts. And as I told you, we know it has something to do with urbanization. And this is the urbanization pattern, let's say. So in this map, you see countries where more than 50% of the population lives in rural areas in red, and more than 50% of the population lives in urban areas in blue, okay? So in 1930, you have a couple of countries like Canada, US, Argentina, Uruguay, Australia, Sweden, UK, Netherlands, France, and Austria, yeah. So that's it. You have that many countries. More than 50% of the population lives in urban areas, while the more than 50% of the population live in rural areas in the other parts, other countries. In 1966, it changed like that. In 2004, it changes like this. In 2025, what we have now is like this. And in 2050, they're expecting it to turn into this. Like, again, we can count, no? Guyana, I think. This is Guyana. This is Chad. Chad means lake, maybe you know. This is Niger, which is different than Nigeria, just south of it. This is Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a very specific condition. It is, the average height is 2,500 meters. So it's really high. So it is very difficult to reach. And it is the main reason it was never colonized. You know, around all of Africa, all other countries, all parts of Africa was colonized during 1800s, but not Ethiopia, because they couldn't penetrate. They couldn't pass the mountains, just like in Thailand. And Thailand is the only place in Asia that happened. So the geography created them barrier. And that's a fun fact. Ethiopia's flag has 3 colors, green, yellow, red. And when other African countries started to get their independence from European countries, they all chose these colors as a respect to Ethiopia. So that's why almost, I don't know, 50% of the African flags have these 3 colors, okay? Because they really like Ethiopia was never colonized. And Ethiopia is also the second most populated country in all of Africa. So, an enormous child rate, again. And this is South Sudan. That's a disputed area. I don't know whether it's going to be like that in the future. This is Kenya, which is kind of surprising because we expect Kenya to expand really fast as well. Behind this, I think this is Burundi, Uganda, Rwanda, Malawi. This is Zimbabwe, Eswatini, and Lesotho. Okay. This is Papua New Guinea, Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Tajikistan. Only these countries we are expecting not to have more than 50% of the population urbanized, okay? So this is not too many countries, and it's not too many people. Hence, we know that urbanization and fertility decline is associated, correlated, and then we know that what I showed you in the beginning, the projection mapping. Okay, so many people are now living in urbanized areas, and you have so many people to feed, no? If people are not living in rural areas, how do we feed these people? So who works in the fields, guys? You expect, and many people expected back in the day as well, when the population rises so quickly, so much, there will be huge famines. But that's not the case either. So these are the world famines. Since 1970s, we almost didn't have any famine compared to the previous years, because after the Second World War, the industrialization and pesticides and GDOs were just so impactful and effective. They increased our capacity to produce food tenfold, So at the moment, there are 6 billion people on the planet, and you need 6 billion ton food to feed these many people. And last year, the world produced 10 billion ton food. So almost twice as much what you need to feed the world population. But this doesn't mean there is no famine, no? There are still people who are in hunger. So, because the problem is, although we are capable of producing so much food, we are not capable of distributing it. Some parts are just wasting a lot of food, and some parts doesn't have enough food, So we should definitely work on this food distribution. But our capacity to produce food is really higher than the population of the world and the projected populations. Okay, so, but these may or may not continue like this. Have you ever heard what an Earth overshoot day is? Let's look at what it says. Okay, it is just, the use of natural resources exceeds what Earth can regenerate in a full year. So if we use just as much that is enough for the world to replace in 1 year, then we don't have any resource crisis, okay? But what we know, starting from 1971, it was the first time the world consumed more than the world could produce, okay? And since then, it continuously going down. So this year and the last year and probably the next year, we finish the resources that Earth can replace in 1 year when it is around late July, okay? So what we do, each year we used from the depot because it cannot reproduce as much, okay? So if we continue to do that, perhaps we are not going to have enough food, or perhaps we are not going to have enough water, whatever. But if we could, reduce our consumption rate and take it below what the Earth should, like the recovery rate is, then it is okay, We can just continue as we are. So it is what I already mentioned to you. This is about there are 805 million people who are suffer from chronic hunger, but not because there's not enough food for them. It's because the food cannot reach to them, okay? So that's another challenge. I would say. And let's see what we have now. Okay, so these are the future projections, what we expect, some numbers, etc. And when you look what we have now, you see that this is not, this is from 2023, I think, because now India is more populated than China. And if you were to show countries depending on their population, you will see something like this, you know. India and China together is almost 25%, 30%, maybe more. I mean, here you can kind of see, but it's easier for you to follow if I show you. After India and China, the third most populated country on the planet is United States. Okay, 327 million, here it says. But the problem with United States, it only grows with migration. So you may hear all those anti-migration tirades, you know, online. In fact, de facto, the only way they continue to grow through migration. They are a very, very pro-migration country when it comes to application, not for the discourse, okay? And the fourth biggest country is Indonesia, which is, again, I think, kind of unexpected, because it is very dispersed and really difficult to navigate within the country. And I like this map a lot because it shows if the world population was 1,000 people, how it would have been distributed, okay? So as you can see, many of them, more than half of them are in Asia, some in North America, and now look, this is a giant country, but only 3 people is here. Why do you think, although Australia is humongous, only 3% of world population, not 0.3% of world population lives there? Do you know anything about Australia? Because more than 90% of Australia is desert, so people can't live there. All those cities that you know are like on the coast. You can't really go, you know, deeper than, I don't know, 100 kilometers. And this is what I told you, 86, 10.43 million, and then from there on, it's gonna only shrink, and this is showing why it is shrinking, because the average child per woman will be below 2. That is the replacement rate. So what we covered was like how the global population will change, when it is gonna peak, and then what is gonna happen after it peaks, and how this population is unevenly distributed, how this growth and shrinking will be different depending on the region and the country, you know, and how this is going to change what architects do, you know. If you are working in an environment where no population increase happens, I guess it will be logical to assume there will be less demand for housing or any other kind of building project. Obviously, architecture is not only for building nowadays, it is also an investment model. It's a commodity. People buy and store value in it without ever using it. So that happens as well. But let's see, that is not our case for now. So the most jobs will be in Africa, you know, as you can guess, no? Because the workforce will be in Africa. And as I mentioned before, it is not going to be possible to move that workforce overnight to another country where you have surplus of housing and infrastructure. You know, there will be cultural resistance, there will be material resistance, and there will be perhaps like governmental restrictions. Who knows? We don't know what the migration strategies will be. Although we expect them to be much looser than what it is now for Europe. Otherwise, like what we know for Europe for sure, without migration, at the end of this century, they're going to lose more than 30% of their population. For Italy and Spain, it's 50%. So without immigration, it's impossible for them to maintain their workforce. And why workforce is important? Maybe you know, maybe you don't, but how pension funds work. So for pension funds to work, what you need is more people joining to the workforce than retiring, so that you don't start to withdraw your investments from the stock market. But if that happens, what we know for sure again, for fact, that the more than 40% of the US stock market is held by pension funds. So the whole world population whole world economy may collapse if the people who join the workforce cannot compensate for people who retire. Okay? So that's why they are going to need more people who are joining to the workforce. We are going to, this workshop is all about that. You guys are going to make some scenarios, what is going to happen. Like how populations will move, how regions will change, what architects will design. So this is the idea. That's why I'm talking about the word population now. Because as architects, urban planners, any kind of designer, this is what we are going to deal with within the next 30, 20, 40 years. For Africa, as I told you, there will be instant cities. Some of them will be planned, some of them will be unplanned. We are going to see what's happening in Kinshasa. Kinshasa is the capital of DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So sometimes, I think this is crazy statistics. It says by year 2080, 70% of Africa's population will live in cities that do not yet exist. Can you imagine 3 billion people? That's a really big number. And this shows how it is gonna, again, these parts will maybe increase so little while Africa will quadruple. And here it shows how the more populous cities, countries will change. Nigeria is already on the 6th level now, yeah. It's gonna be the 3rd most populated. DRC, not even in the list. But DRC will be the 5th biggest populated. Because DRC has a very specific thing. I will show you the median age in DRC, whose population is 112 million, is 15.8, guys. There are 112 million people in DRC, and their average age is 15.8. So they are gonna make families, and we expect them to continue for 2 generations to show the same habits with their parents, okay? So at the moment it is 5.9 live per woman over there. It may go down over years, but we are going to see it's already down from 6.70 or whatever. But what happens? So then you have these kind of things. Kinshasa is one of the cities which is fastest growing, and you have floods, you have problems with informal settlements, etc. So we don't know how we are going to handle this situation. Yes, we're shrinking Europe and East Asia while increasing Africa, okay? So it is going to have different impacts, as I mentioned before. Sometimes change the order. So the migration uncertainty, as we talked. If the West will be open or if the West will be closed. 100%. As I told you, I don't expect it to continue this anti-migration related discourse, but who knows, it may happen. But even if they say, come, whatever you are, come, it may or may not be possible because of the reasons we talked. People may say, you know what, you humiliated me, you despised me for so long that I don't want to come and live with you. Or people may say, okay, that's a better lifestyle. That's a better living standards. I'm going to do that. You don't know what's going to happen. There will be many different scenarios. And as we already mentioned, there will be building stock features. Some places will be in surplus. Some other places will be in stark need. Okay? So I'm going to show you some scenarios, some different examples about this, what already happened. One example is Detroit. As you know, it was a well-populated city, and after the 2008 crisis, it became empty, This is what you have. All these lots were full of buildings, but the people who owned those plots had to demolish their buildings because when they stopped living here, they were squatters. And if a crime happens in a property you own, you are accepted as complicit in the crime. And because they couldn't stay there to control whether somebody will live there or not, they had to demolish their own houses to prevent liability. Look, like it is in late 1800s, you have these historical buildings. By in 2011, all of them are gone because nobody lives there anymore. This is a very interesting project. Using Google Street View, they take photos from 2009, 2013, 2019, and 2022. So you have these two suburban houses, they are gone. Same. You have these two suburban houses, they are gone. Here you have three of them, they are gone. But here, they are coming back. Because everything became so cheap, there was a trend within especially artist community within the US, to go and buy a whole house for $10,000. I had friends who did that. So I think these are by them. They just fixed their housing. Another example is extreme expansion in the informal growth. What they say, like favelas, this is from Venezuela, Caracas, these are already limited only by the geography. So what they expect, all favelas to go higher and to be denser. So subdivisions within the units. And adding floors, adding other units. And I wouldn't say this is a horrible spatial place. Spatially, it's not bad. Maybe the living conditions, maybe. We don't know about that. But you can still have a nice space. Okay? This is from Brazil. Or like Hong Kong. It's a different reason. Hong Kong is a self-contained, like it's an island, first of all. So you have limited amount of space. And when you have high population, all you have is the sky. So it just goes up and up. In Hong Kong, you have this very interesting example. Some of you may know. They call it the Wallet City. It started like this, and then it became like this, and then it became like this. And then in the end, the Hong Kong government just demolished it because it was enacting anarchy. So they couldn't rule it, they couldn't penetrate it, they couldn't control what was happening inside, etc. Another thing that happens, which is really weird for me, let's say, magnet cities, they call it, like Dubai or Las Vegas, taking people to the places they wouldn't have gone otherwise, So as you can see, this is Vegas in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of the Nevada desert. This is Dubai again. You have this line and rest of it again. Nobody lives here, nothing happens. And there are like crazier projects, like the line. This. The Saudi Arabian prince wanted to build a city like this. It started, this is a real photo, this is not fake. They started to build it, but then they stopped it. And these are the interior renders of that line. Making 10 million people live in the middle of desert. So how you can make scenarios for your workshop parts? First of all, you need to decide what you expect for the chosen part of the world, how it is going to change. Okay? And you need to be aware of some geographical features of the world while doing that. What is this? I didn't remove the continents, okay? This is Pacific. Pacific is just so big that if you try to go through Pacific somewhere, it's the same distance almost going through all the continents. But because we never look at the world from the Pacific, we never really understand how Pacific is gigantic, That's why nobody, it's very rare for even the planes to go over Pacific. You only have Hawaii here, literally in the middle, and that's it. So be aware, Pacific is not really an option. Pacific is really something that rules today's world with its humongous size. And because Pacific is so gigantic, China has this One Road, One Belt project. Maybe you heard about it. I mentioned this in the other class as well. What they do, they are trying to revive the Silk Road by integrating existing railways And they already completed the first one. This one, the new Eurasian land bridge, it says. So today it is possible to take the train from Beijing and leave it in London. The trip takes 21 days, but you don't need to leave the train. Okay, so it is already connected, it's done. The second one they would like to do is the middle one. So Caspian Sea here, kind of, more than the Caspian Sea, the real problem is the Himalayas. Again, unpenetratable, like the Ethiopia, very difficult, very expensive to penetrate. So they are trying to, do that. They do their best. I think they're going to do it eventually. And the third one is going through Pakistan and getting here. They are building a deep sea port here. A deep sea port means a port which is at least 150 meters deep, okay? So that the joint tankers can dock. Why do you think China is building this south one, taking all their goods above India through Pakistan and then taking them to the ships? Because the next demand pool is in Africa, okay? So all rest of the world is either gonna shrink or gonna stay the same, while in Africa you will have 4 times more demand. Maybe they are not gonna have the resources, so still maybe Europe will have more resources, but maybe not, okay? So this population expand will come with certain kinds of demand, and China knows that. And because China knows that, they are building all these maritime routes, railways from Kenya towards other parts of Africa, okay? So this is definitely something to watch for. And at the moment, they must use the South China Sea through Philippines, but South China Sea, again, a very disputed area under a lot of conflicts through the international water laws. China says it is mine, and not only United States, but many countries led by United States say, no, it's not yours, it is international waters. So China doesn't want to take that risk, so they want to have another option, through this one. The second big player will be Russia. Why? Because of this guy here. This is the North Pole without the ice, okay? So if the climate change takes off and we expect, what we expect happens, it's going to be really great for Russia because at the moment it is, the saying warm seas? I kept hearing warm seas all my life without understanding what warm seas mean until 5 years ago. Warm seas mean a sea which never froze, okay? So 12 months over the year, it's always water. That's a warm sea. Why it is a concept? Because Russia doesn't have any warm sea except Black Sea. All other water around Russia is frozen at least 4 months of the year. So it's unreliable. They cannot use those routes throughout the year. But if the climate change happens, and if the North Pole is gone, that's music to Russia's ear, So they can use the North Pole for navigations, and we expect a lot of port cities around the North Pole. Look, this is the highest ice, and this is the lowest ice level in 2015. But if it's all gone, these are all will be open for trade routes. I had a friend whose PhD was on this while I was doing my PhD. His PhD was calculating how the world trade routes will have shape, how they are going to happen after the Arctic ice sea is gone. So this is not a speculation. That's something expected and calculated. So while we are making our scenarios, we need to be aware of these kind of things that may happen that is part of the world's reality, So what we have demographics, shrinking or growing. We have economics, magnets, these boom times. We have climate change or ecological pressures, depending on the geography of the region. So what I expect you to first divide your narrative to divisions, eras, how it is going to change while the population still were rising, how it is going to change after it starts to decline, or maybe it's not going to decline, it's going to be a speculative project which keeps expanding. I don't know, it's going to be your scenario. And what I care, your scenario, your narrative, your story, whatever you call it, needs to be coherent, okay? So chain of thought and argumentation. So this happened because of this happened, and then because of that this happened, and because of that I expect something like this to happen. Well, I suggest this kind of solution to these things that happened, okay? This kind of argumentative chain of thought reasoning. So what you can use as visual toolkit. Of course, you can use artificial intelligence, any kind of generative AI production tools. Maybe you already recognize what this is. They made a competition about the Kowloon velocity, and people started to make different versions, different versions of different scenarios within that using AI tools, okay? So you can choose this kind of aesthetic, you can choose a completely different kind of aesthetic, but what you are going to have, what you are going to show us in the end, the final spatial scenario, must come from data and all the chain of thought, chain of events that I have been mentioning to you. As a tip, I would like to tell you, I don't know whether you know what a JSON prompt, but if you use a JSON prompt, just Google it or ask ChatGPT to give you a JSON prompt template. And then instead of writing whole sentences, you can just use the JSON, which is JavaScript object notification. Okay, so you can create objects and it's really controllable. So it gives all the controls to you. So look, this image is when I just tell it to create a favela. And this image is when I use the JSON. So it gives you so much control, okay? And yeah, maps and graphs first, because your scenario must make sense depending on what I have been telling. Then there will be a storyboard for you to tell your scenario, your story to us. You know what a storyboard is, I guess, like just images. Captures, if you will, from the timeline you are going to create. So yeah, like it must be coherent, logical, supported by data, etc. And it must tell us what the demographic plausibility, how the demographics will change, how it should be kind of coherent in terms of the style, the visual language it uses, and the narrative should make sense, okay? Even if it doesn't matter what you are going to end with. It just should follow a logical chain of thought. This part of the world I'm working on, and depending on the existing population and the trends, I expect this part of the world to change in this direction, and I'm suggesting these kind of solutions, or I'm expecting these kind of spatial arrangements, etc. Okay? Thank you.